This is Tom Shadyac. He's the producer-director of Bruce Almighty and Patch Adams, among many other well-known films. Tom, thank you for being with us.
Good to be here, brother.
One of the things that I wanted to ask you about is the landscape and the attitude in Hollywood. Do you sense that there's a collective movement towards more spiritual evolution and conscious attitudes that might be able to project itself through finished media?
Well, I generally don't look at the larger picture. I look at the micro picture, and I see people wanting to change. I see people wanting to tell stories that are conscious, that affect, that might talk about this shift. So yeah, from a grassroots level, I feel it. And so that grassroots level, of course, will eventually make it, to the top.
So that'll bubble up into the corporate mindset.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think the corporate mindset has to shift. And as consciousness itself shifts through individual shifts, I think we'll find one day that the corporate mindset itself will shift, and it will no longer be just movies about making money, but movies about making a difference, and movies that can actually add a value instead of just add a monetary value, but it can add an emotional or an ethical value.
Now, do you think that with things being the way they are on the planet, we're at a critical, what some people are calling our choice point, where the decisions that we make collectively in, say, the next 5 or 10 years are going to affect the future of humanity for decades, if not centuries to come? Do you think that the people and the machines that are in power to deliver messages to broad spectrums of humanity actually have a social obligation to assist in positive global change?
Well, again, I look at it at one level below that. I think each individual has the responsibility to look at their own life and what they're reflecting in the world, through the stories they're telling, through the businesses they're supporting, and say, how am I a part of the world I want to have versus the world that we now have? So I just believe it starts individually. And then leadership very rarely comes from the top. It doesn't come from our, quote, leaders in Congress. It doesn't come from studio executives. It comes from people like you, myself, people who go to our movies saying, no, I want something different, or I want to do something different. And then I think on top shifts, after that bottom shift.
What you're saying basically is something that's been echoed through a lot of different philosophies now, is that the change outside begins with the change inside.
Absolutely. I think right now we're looking outside ourselves, which is fine, but until you've traveled inward and said, what can I do? How am I reflecting the values that I want to see? Who am I? I mean, Gandhi said it the simplest: be that change. Be that change. So I hope people will again begin to look at their own lives and see how they can reflect it, and then watch the power of that move. That's the revolution. The revolution is a personal revolution, and then it shows up on the macro level.
Now, being somebody who's produced a lot of very well-known movies and been a part of the Hollywood scene for a long time, how do you feel about the perception that there is a lack of consciousness in Hollywood among people and among the powers that can make the decision?
I don't think you can point at Hollywood and say Hollywood has a lack of consciousness. I don't think you can isolate Hollywood out. There may be a lack of consciousness at this moment, or a consciousness that is evolving. And when that consciousness evolves, it will be reflected in Hollywood. So we are simply, in quote, Hollywood, an outgrowth of a collective energy, if you will. And so when that collective energy changes by a woman in Iowa changing, a man or a woman in Africa, then that shift is going to resonate, and Hollywood itself is going to shift. So yeah, we have a responsibility individually, but I don't think it's an accident we have the Hollywood that we have. I don't think it's an accident that we have BP. We have it because of who we are. Our desires, what we need, what we put our attentions to, and when that shifts, we're going to be shifting to solar, to other wind, to other sustainable forms of energy. It's about us.
Reiterate again for us just really how important it is that the change begins with the people watching this video.
Well, I think there's this idolatry of magnitude in our culture. You have to do something big. You have to release a big, huge feature film to have an effect. You have to start a big company to have an effect. You have to make tens of thousands, millions of dollars to have an effect. And that's not true. Science is now uncovering that the tiniest act affects. It causes a ripple effect. You can't not affect something else by what you do. So the power is really with individuals. It's really in the way we greet each other, what we put our attention to, what we think about, what we value, and then what we teach our kids, not just in verbal. We teach our kids about love and kindness, and then we We don't show that and reflect that in our lives. We get impatient. We have wars very quickly. We have to begin to behave and live unified. And that unified life from the individual has a scientific measurable power that emanates out.
Do you perceive that as a quantum leap in human understanding, or just a return to something that collectively we may have forgotten?
I think you're right on, and it may be both. There may be a quantum leap to forgetting who we are. And who we are, the idea is, what is the essential nature of reality? What is that? And that's who we are. And I think if we wake up to that idea, which may be an ancient idea, I believe it is, I think it's been around a long time, we will take a leap in consciousness and therefore behavior, and the world will shift. And I believe it's going to. You know, there's a quote in a film I just did called I Am. Einstein said, humanity's going to require a substantially new way of thinking to survive. That's the consciousness shift. We have to start thinking new and then behaving differently. And then we got a shot.
That's awesome. Tom Shadyac, thank you for being with us.
Right on.